In 2021, actor William Shatner, who was 90 years old at the time, went to space aboard one of the Jeff Bezos-owned Blue Origin rockets. Space has always been a huge part of Shatner's life, after portraying Captain Kirk in the original Star Trek series, which debuted in 1966. You can see it on video, Shatner crossing the Kármán line, the line known as the boundary between outer space and Earth's atmosphere, becoming weightless and viewing planet Earth from 62 miles above mean sea level. You'd think that this would be a joyous moment for Shatner, who received a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to experience something that he had only ever really lived out on a film set. But instead, he says he was struck with a profound sense of grief. "I was crying," he said. "I didn't know what I was crying about. I had to go off someplace and sit down and think, what's the matter with me? And I realized I was in grief. It was the death that I saw in space and the life force that I saw coming from the planet, the blue, the beige, and the white. And I realized one was death and the other was life." This kind of reaction is not uncommon for astronauts. It's a documented phenomenon called the overview effect, where people are overcome with an overwhelming sense of emotion after viewing Earth from space. The experience impacted Shatner so much that it got him thinking more about his remaining time on Earth and made him a more passionate advocate for climate justice. "I wept for the Earth because I realized it's dying," Shatner said. "I dedicated my book, Boldly Go, to my great-grandchild, who's 3 now, and in the dedication, say it's them, those youngsters, who are going to reap what we have sown in terms of the destruction of the Earth." So, all of this sounds like a pretty profound experience, given that the source of it is this Jeff Bezos vanity project, right? Like, here is William Shatner, who had this, like, lifelong dream of going up into space, and he gets the opportunity to do so. And he has this really, like, sad and grounding experience where he realizes that, space is a really cold and dead place, and therefore we have to do more to protect the Earth and the planet that we live on. And I feel like that is the best outcome, I guess, that one could have when viewing a famous person taking this journey, because it kind of takes the cynicism out of it a bit. So surely the next star-studded celebrity attempt at sending people into orbit would have the exact same reception and tone, right? Right, guys? Right?
Pop singer Katy Perry is officially an astronaut.
Katy!
And very happy to be back on Earth.
So, Gayle, how was the trip to space?
The trip was an amazing experience. The only problem is you little peons aren't as inspired as how we wanted you to be. You know, whenever celebrities are together and they do stuff, get the point?
I'm not really seeing the point. How does the ride to space help society?
I'm sorry, a ride? When men do stuff, when they go to space, it's not a ride that they're taking. I mean, we literally took the same route that the Space Jam people took.
Oh yeah, Mama. I see your tight little ass in space. Are you trying to tell me that 6 bitches went in space this morning? Fuck yeah!
Flight, we are at T-minus 45 minutes, and here the astronauts come.
So, Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos is really into space tourism right now, as are a lot of his weird frog-turned-human-like contemporaries. Bezos himself completed a space trip back in 2021 as well, in an 11-minute flight comprised of himself, his brother Mark Bezos, an 18-year-old physics student whose dad won an auction to put him there, and 82-year-old aviator Wally Funk, whose lifelong dream it was to become an astronaut.
Back in the 60s, I was in the Mercury 13 program. They asked me, "Do you want to be an astronaut?" I said, "Yes." They told me that I had done better and completed the work faster than any of the guys. So I got a hold of NASA 4 times. I said, "I want to become an astronaut," but nobody would take me. I didn't think that I would ever get to go up. Nothing has ever gotten in my way. And they said, "Wally, you're a girl, you can't do that." I said, "Guess what? Doesn't matter what you are. You can still do it if you want to do it." And I like to do things that nobody has ever done.
We're going to fly you up into space on the very first flight. That's your
So I covered this story back in 2021 when it happened, and like in the newsroom we like to comment on the stories that we cover. And so I remember, obviously a lot of us were kind of cynical about Jeff Bezos doing this, like, oh, it's a vanity project, it's a strange use of resources when you have that many. But at the very least, we were all like, okay. And like, albeit this could be like a PR planted kernel of optimism, but we were like, at the very least, right? Somebody like Wally Funk got to go up there, they got this opportunity to live their dream. And that's like a, you know, an inspirational, like, okay, you know, we can be mad at everybody, but we can't be mad at her kind of thing. But also what I remember about that launch was like, everyone was very clear on like what they were doing up there. You know, it was a civilian launch. It was 10 to 11 minutes. There was minimal risk and danger involved in the operation. This is a part of space that people have been to before. And so that is why I was so confused when seeing the coverage of the all-female Blue Origin spaceflight crew and their launch.
Blue Origin's 11-minute spaceflight is launching from Texas in just about 24 hours. So this crew includes music artist Katy Perry, Jeff Bezos' fiance, a film producer, a bioastronautics research scientist, a former NASA rocket scientist, Aisha Bowe, and CBS This Morning anchor Gayle King.
So there are a couple weird things about this story, right? One, the makeup of the crew itself is a little bizarre. You have Jeff Bezos' fiance, a movie producer, one actual astronaut, one actual scientist, Gayle King, and Katy Perry. It seems like these Blue Origin crew selections are always very calculated in the sense that there's always at least one person that you can root for. You know, the Wally Funk of the bunch. And we do have that here, and I'll get to that a little later, but I think for optics purposes, Gayle King and Katy Perry were probably not the best choices, as they both became the spectacle of the story and drew a lot of ire for the whole bored rich people going to space thing. The second thing that was weird about this whole situation was that I guess everyone literally forgot that these Blue Origin flights are an established thing. There's minimal danger associated with it, all things considered, and that the flights are and always have been around 11 minutes long. Leading up to the launch, there were endless takes about how Gayle King was scared to go up there, which I'm sure she was, but people went as far as to imply that Oprah was forcing her to do the trip and that she herself was having like a premonition that something was going to go terribly wrong, which, if memory serves me correctly, was not a talking point at all with any of these other space tourism stories. So launch day happens and it goes fine. They do the 11-minute flight. For some reason, everyone is like, holy shit, why did I think they were actually going to the International Space Station? And that's because some of you either can't read or don't care to. And we get our first look at the inside of the rocket as the crew reaches space, which brings us to our first memeable faux pas, Katy Perry and her Daisy. Look, at this point, I'm not going to dunk on Katy Perry more than I need to here. Everything that needs to be said has already been said, but during this moment, Katy did two things that made people a little frustrated. One was revealing her Lifetime's tour set list on this little butterfly-shaped piece of paper, and the other was holding this daisy meant to symbolize her actual daughter Daisy, and looking into the camera with this weird expression instead of, you know, looking down at planet Earth. Obviously, using a very expensive spaceflight as a means of album promotion is a little cringe, and you can see why people are memeing on the whole staring at the flower moment, right? Like, it's not hard. It's not rocket science.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
So before we talk about the aftermath of this event, I want to talk about which arguments are being made in bad faith and which ones are not. The first one, and most obvious one, that I'm going to get out of the way, is that people are claiming that this flight was fake. You guys have peasant brain. This is not even an original conspiracy theory. People have been claiming that the moon landing was faked since it happened, you know? Like, but now the difference, right, is that conspiracy theorists have a platform and their ideas have to be treated as equal or as like different opinions, when in reality, like, we should just be telling these people that they're stupid. The Venn diagram of people who think that the Blue Origin launch was fake and raw milk consumers is a circle. It's a circle. The second argument here that I want to unpack is the idea that the reason why this whole situation drew so much criticism is because it was a crew of all women. And like, can I say that that's a part of it? Probably. But it's also, you know, not only is it all women, and like maybe it would have been framed differently if it were all male celebrities going up there, but like, it's this Blue Origin was framing it as this sort of like dated girl boss feminism, you know, when they all went up there and they did like the take up space chant. Like, it's, you know, it makes sense why people were not particularly inspired by this, right? Especially since, and I'm thinking about making a whole separate video about this, the story of our time, like of this decade, is the mounting inequality between the upper and wealthier classes in this country, at least here in America, and the middle and lower classes. And, you know, every piece of, like, fictional media is commentary about the lives of the ultra-wealthy and the rich and famous. And obviously, that fiction has to, you know, be inspired from somewhere, and a lot of times it's, you know, mirrored by events in real life. So it's very easy to contrast this moment of these, you know, rich people using this opportunity to go to space for like a 10-minute joyride while people back on Earth suffer ramifications of the climate crisis and, you know, can't afford their rent and their grocery bills. Like, the commentary, like, I feel like we're all being hit over the head with it in our fictional media, but it's like, it's because it comes from real life. I think that message of class transcends anything that the women are doing up there, you know what I mean? Like, I think for the most part, of course, you have misogynistic assholes who are gonna be more receptive to the idea of making fun of these women because they're women. But again, I think it's more of like the rich-poor divide that kind of transcends that gender barrier in terms of this specific discourse. I also don't think it helps that, like, Gayle King and Katy Perry have been sort of like the main memes to come out of this situation. Gayle King because she was clearly like scared of going up there and that became its own talking point, and then like Katy Perry just being Katy Perry, you know? There is such a fine line between what makes something a serious event versus what makes it a memeable thing that we're all allowed to like point and laugh at and call cringe. Like, it's kind of a perfect concoction of things. Like, the line between cool and cringe is a very thin one, and I think, you know, it was just you know, putting the right pieces together for this to boil over in a specific way. Also, again, we have something to directly, you know, compare this to, in the sense that William Shatner, who I talked about in the beginning of this video, went up there and had this very kind of profound and somber experience, and that doesn't really fit within the narrative of like the optimism of space tourism marketing, and this felt more like that. Like, the through line that kept coming up for me is like, we should be celebrating this. This is inspiring. And for most people, it's not. There's not much like hope to be had in this outside of, you know, some people's individual stories, you know, who got the opportunity to go up there, and they're not Katy Perry and Gayle King. Speaking of Gayle King, she has been on the defensive since her return to Earth just about all of this social media criticism, so let's talk a little bit about what she has said in defense of her Blue Origin trip.
You know, this is what bothers me, because I've certainly read some of the things online coming from people that I know, that I like, that I consider friends. And this is what I would say to that. Space is not an either or, it's a both and. And because you do something in space doesn't mean you're taking anything away from Earth. And what you're doing in space is trying to make things better here on Earth. What Blue Origin wants to do is take the waste here and figure out a way to put it in space to make our planet cleaner. I mean, Jeff Bezos has so many ideas, and the people that are working there are really devoted and dedicated to making our planet a better place. That's number one. Number two, have you been? Have you been? If you've been and you still feel that way after you come back, please let's have a conversation. Number three, please don't call it a ride. That is not a friggin' ride. Whenever a man goes up, you have never said to an astronaut, boy, what a ride. You know, we duplicated the same trajectory that Alan Shepard did back in the day, pretty much. No one called that a ride. It was called a flight. It was called a journey, because a ride implies that it's something frivolous or something that's lighthearted. There was nothing frivolous about what we did. And the machine that we were on, and what it took for the people to get that machine up and running, to get us up and get us back down safely. So, you know, I'm very disappointed, and very saddened by it. And I also say this, what it's doing to inspire other women and young girls, please don't ignore that. I've had so many women and young girls reach out to me, and men too, by the way, men too, that say, wow, I never thought I could do that, but I see you doing it at this stage of my life. Who would have thunk it? Not me. And how inspired they are.
So here's the thing. I respect Gayle King. I just have a lot of respect for like women in the broadcast news industry because I can tell you firsthand that it's rough out there, right? I think she's good at her job. The R. Kelly interview, iconic. But I think, first of all, people don't like Gayle King because of Oprah, because she's Oprah's best friend, and people have their own hang-ups about Oprah. Some of them are valid, some of them are a little crazy, I think. But Gayle King didn't help matters because she played into the exact criticism that people are having about this situation by being like, well, have you been to space? And the whole point being that, like, no. People of a certain tax bracket or lower don't get to go to space. They get $12 eggs. And she had a little bit of the words for if this was all men, like it wouldn't be categorized as taking a ride or whatever. And I do think that's true. I think it would be categorized a little differently if it were like an all-male crew. I think it would be more critiqued in like the hyper-masculine, like male conquest of space framing. And I think that's also like as valid as like the Girlboss space trip, you know what I mean? I also think a lot of it is still just this old school reverence that we have for space exploration. And again, I think I come at this from the perspective of somebody who used to work in journalism. Space launches, splashdowns, NASA visits, all of that, like that is like the TV world's like old school bread and butter, you know what I mean? Like people used to be all over that, and like even now that it's become more of like a privatized, like accessible thing, we're still all over it because of, I think, this old school American reverence that we have for the space race. And that's not to say that NASA isn't cool as shit. I think NASA's great. This isn't NASA though. This is like cynical privatized conquest from the Amazon guy. And there's, in general, just less to be revered about that. It's an inherently more pessimistic viewpoint because of who's funding it. I think it's also worth mentioning here that it recently came out that Katy Perry is also reportedly regretting some aspects of the trip. According to sources, Katy doesn't regret going to space, but that she does, quote, regret making a public spectacle out of it, and that she regrets sharing the daisy with the world, and she wishes the video footage from inside the pod was never shown. And again, there is no reason for me to dunk on Katy Perry today, because life already has. The last thing I want to talk about here is, I think throughout this coverage, a lot of it has been about Katy Perry and about Gayle King. And there's one name that I have not seen brought up as much in contrast to those two women, and that is the name Amanda Nguyen. Amanda Nguyen became the first Vietnamese woman to ever go to space on this recent Blue Origin flight, which is cool in and of itself, but also Amanda was pursuing a career in the STEM field. She wanted to be an astronaut. She was going to school at Harvard University, but she had to put those plans on hold in 2013 after a traumatic sexual assault experience. After that experience, she became a vocal advocate for the rights of sexual assault survivors, even pushing for the passage of a piece of legislation called the Bill of Rights for Sexual Assault Survivors. And that work earned her a nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2019. Years after that terrible experience put her dreams on hold, Amanda Nguyen was finally able to go to space. And you can debate whether or not she's actually an astronaut, You can look at all of the sort of pessimism around it, and I think you're valid to do so. But one thing I'm not going to shit on is a Wally Funk or an Amanda Nguyen getting their chance and getting their opportunity. And space tourism, because it's such a vanity project for the rich, like, it's not going away. And we're probably going to see a couple more of these celebrity space flights in the future. And because it's not going away, at the very least, I would like more people to put that kind of attention on these remarkable people who are there for PR reasons, but at the very least, like, they are getting a chance to do something important to them. And that is more important to me than what Gayle King and Katy Perry think about space. I will put more information about Amanda Nguyen's nonprofit, the RISE program, down in the description below so you can read all about her remarkable work. But yeah, thanks so much, you guys, and I'll see you next time.
I miss this place you had in your heart. My dad still tells me when they're playing your songs, laughing at the way that you would say, if only, baby, there were cameras in the traffic lights, they'd make me a star, they'd make me a star.